My name is Matt, I'm 35, and my wife, Jessica, is 32. We've been married for 7 years, and I thought we had a pretty good life. I'm a construction manager, and Jess works part-time as a yoga instructor. From the outside, we probably looked like a happy, middle-class couple with a cute little house in the suburbs and a Labrador named Buddy. But cracks started forming about 6 months ago. It was little things at first. Jess became glued to her phone, giggling at random texts and turning the screen away if I came near. She started wearing makeup at weird times, like when I'd leave for work, even though she said she wasn't going anywhere. She also got unusually picky about how the house looked, insisting that it wasn't up to standard. This from a woman who used to leave her dirty coffee mugs on the counter for days. The weirdest part? The plumbing obsession. Out of nowhere, she decided our house had serious plumbing issues. She'd complain about the faucet dripping or the water pressure being too low in the shower. I didn't see any real problems, but Jess was insistent. She hired a plumber named Chad, a guy who, I later found out, would destroy my life. At first, I chalked it up to Jess being, well, Jess. She's always been a little high maintenance, but I loved her quirks, or at least I used to. I never suspected that her sudden obsession with house repairs would turn into an obsession with the guy doing the repairs. Little did I know that dripping faucet was just the tip of the iceberg. It was a Friday afternoon when things really started unraveling. I came home early from work, something I don't usually do, but I wasn't feeling well. Jess didn't expect me, and when I pulled into the driveway, Chad's truck was parked right in front of the house. I walked inside, and the first thing I noticed was the sound of laughter coming from upstairs. Jess has this high-pitched laugh she does when she's flirting, and I heard it loud and clear. My stomach dropped, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe they were just chatting while Chad worked on something. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I called out, "Jess?" And suddenly, the laughter stopped. A few seconds later, I heard hurried footsteps. Jess came halfway down the stairs, her face flushed, her hair slightly messy. "Oh, hey, babe. I didn't expect you home so early," she said, her voice a little too cheerful. "Yeah, I'm not feeling great," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's going on?" "Chad's just finishing up the shower. The water pressure is finally fixed," she said, flashing me a big smile. I nodded, but something didn't sit right. Why was she acting so nervous? And why did Chad need to fix the water pressure for the 3rd time this month? I decided to play it cool, so I went into the kitchen to grab some water, but I couldn't stop myself from peeking upstairs. That's when I saw it. Chad, shirtless, coming out of our bedroom. My blood ran cold. "What the hell is this?" I shouted, my voice echoing through the house. Chad froze, his face turning pale. Jess rushed down the stairs, putting herself between us. "Matt, calm down. This isn't what it looks like," she said, her tone suddenly defensive. "Oh, really? Then why is he half naked in my house? And why the hell is he coming out of our bedroom?" Chad tried to stammer out an explanation. Something about needing to wash up because of a pipe burst. But I wasn't buying it. The guy didn't even have his tools with him. Jess, on the other hand, doubled down. "Don't overreact, Matt. You always jump to conclusions. Chad was just doing me a favor." "Doing you a favor?" I cut her off, my voice shaking with anger. "What kind of favor involves you giggling upstairs while he walks out of my bedroom without a shirt?" She didn't have an answer. Instead, she folded her arms and glared at me like I was the one in the wrong. "Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't need someone else to fix things around here." Felt like a slap to the face. I stood there, staring at Jess as her words sank in. Did she really just try to blame me for this? My chest tightened, and my fists clenched at my sides. Chad, the so-called plumber, stood awkwardly at the bottom of the stairs, his eyes darting toward the door like he was planning his escape. "Fix things around here?" I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. "You mean him sneaking around in my house? Sneaking around with you?" Jess rolled her eyes, crossing her arms even tighter. "You're overreacting, Matt. Nothing happened, okay? Chad was just cleaning up after working on the shower." You're being paranoid. Paranoid? I snapped, taking a step closer to her. You seriously expect me to believe that? You've been acting weird for months. Jess. Always on your phone, making excuses to be home alone, complaining about fake plumbing problems. And now this guy's walking out of our bedroom half naked? Give me a break. She opened her mouth to respond but didn't have a good answer. Instead, she did what she always does when she's cornered. She flipped the script. You know what, Matt? Maybe if you weren't so busy with work all the time, I wouldn't feel so neglected. Maybe if you actually paid attention to me, we wouldn't be in this mess. Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. She wasn't even denying it anymore. She was justifying it. I looked at Chad, who was slowly backing toward the door. You, get out, I barked, pointing toward the exit. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed his shirt from the banister and bolted out the door without saying a word. Once he was gone, I turned back to Jess. So what now? I asked, my voice cold. Are you going to keep lying? Or are you finally going to tell me the truth? Her face softened for a moment, like she was about to come clean. But then she put her hands on her hips and said, Fine. You want the truth? Chad and I might have been seeing each other, but it's not like it's serious or anything. And honestly, Matt, it's your fault. My fault, I shouted, my voice echoing through the house. You're the one sneaking around with a guy who fixes pipes for a living, and you think this is my fault? She shrugged, her nonchalance cutting deeper than anything else. I wouldn't have to if you weren't so emotionally unavailable all the time. You think money and a stable job are enough to make a marriage work? Newsflash, Matt. I need more than that. For a second, I couldn't even speak. Her audacity left me speechless. Finally, I said, You're unbelievable, Jess. Unbelievable. After Jess's bombshell, I felt like my entire world had collapsed. I sat on the couch, staring at the floor while she stood there, acting like she'd just won an argument about leaving the toilet seat up. My mind was racing, trying to process what she'd said. It's your fault. Those words echoed in my head like a broken record. I thought back to everything I'd done to keep our life stable. The long hours at work, the surprise date nights, the trips I planned even when money was tight. All of it was supposed to build a life together. And now, here I was, blindsided by a betrayal I never saw coming. Jess, for her part, seemed completely unfazed. She grabbed her phone and plopped onto the armchair across the room, scrolling like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just admitted to sleeping with some random plumber. Like my entire life wasn't crumbling right in front of her. Do you even care? I finally asked, my voice cracking. She looked up, almost annoyed. Of course I care, Matt. But what do you want me to say? I already told you why it happened. Why it happened? I repeated, standing up. You're acting like this is some minor inconvenience. You cheated on me, Jess. You lied to me for God knows how long. And now you're blaming me for it? Do you even feel guilty? She rolled her eyes again and muttered, You're being so dramatic. Dramatic? That word set something off in me. All the hurt, confusion, and anger boiled over, and I let it out. You know what? Screw this. Screw you. I've given everything to this marriage, Jess. I've put up with your mood swings, your spending sprees, your constant need for attention. And this is how you repay me. She stood up, finally looking a little defensive. Don't act like you're some saint, Matt. You're not perfect either. You work too much, you're always tired, and you barely even notice me anymore. What did you expect? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My wife, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, was standing there blaming me for her decision to cheat. It was like I didn't even recognize her anymore. The room felt suffocating, so I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. I can't do this right now, I said without looking back. Where are you going? She called after me. To clear my head. Don't wait up. As I drove aimlessly through the neighborhood, the weight of everything hit me all at once. I pulled over to the side of the road and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel as tears streamed down my face. I felt angry, humiliated, betrayed, but most of all I felt broken. Jess wasn't just my wife. She was my partner, my best friend. And now I didn't know who she was anymore. I sat in my truck for what felt like hours, staring at the dashboard and replaying everything over and over in my head. Part of me wanted to storm back into the house and scream at Jess until she showed even an ounce of remorse. But the rational part of me knew that wouldn't fix anything. I needed a plan, a way to get some clarity and figure out what to do next. I finally decided to go to my friend Brian's place. Brian's been my best friend since college, and if there's anyone who'd tell me the truth without sugarcoating it, it's him. When I showed up at his door unannounced, he took one look at me and said, "What the hell happened, man?" I told him everything about Jess, the plumber, the excuses, the blame. By the time I finished, Brian was pacing the room, muttering every curse word in the book. "Are you serious?" he finally said. "She actually tried to blame you? That's low, man. Even for her." I frowned. "What do you mean, even for her?" Brian hesitated, scratching the back of his neck. "Look, I didn't want to say anything before, but Jess, she's always had this way of making everything about her. You've bent over backward to make her happy, and it's never been enough for her. I didn't think she'd take it this far, though." His words hit me hard. I'd always brushed off Jess's selfishness as just part of who she was, but hearing someone else say it made it all too real. I felt a mix of anger and shame. Anger at Jess for taking advantage of me and shame for not seeing it sooner. "So, what do I do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Brian didn't hesitate. "You've got two options. Confront her with a clear head and figure out if there's anything left to save, or cut your losses and lawyer up. But whatever you do, don't let her manipulate you into thinking this is your fault." I nodded, feeling a little steadier. "Yeah, you're right. I need to confront her again, but on my terms this time." When I got home that night, the house was quiet. Jess was in the living room, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. It took every ounce of willpower I had not to yell at her. Instead, I sat down across from her and said calmly, "We need to talk." She looked up, her expression bored. "What now, Matt?" I leaned forward, keeping my voice steady. "I've been thinking about everything you said earlier, about how this is somehow my fault. And I've realized something. I'm done being blamed for your choices." Her face tightened, but I didn't give her a chance to interrupt. "I'm giving you one chance to come clean, Jess. One chance to tell me everything, no lies, no excuses. Because if you don't, I'm walking away from this marriage for good." Jess stared at me, her lips pursed, as if weighing her options. For a moment I thought she might actually come clean, but instead, she leaned back on the couch and crossed her arms. "I already told you, Matt. You're making this into something bigger than it is. Chad was just, I don't know, a distraction. It's not like I planned for this to happen." I shook my head, feeling my blood boil. "A distraction? Do you even hear yourself? You slept with another man. Multiple times, I'm guessing. And now you're sitting here trying to act like it's no big deal." She rolled her eyes, an infuriating habit that was starting to feel like a slap in the face every time she did it. "Look, it's not like we were in love or anything. Chad and I had fun, but that's all it was. Besides, it's not like you've been the perfect husband." I leaned forward, trying to keep my voice steady. "Tell me something, Jess. When did this start? And don't you dare lie to me." She hesitated, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. Finally, she sighed. "Fine. If you really want to know, it started a couple of months ago. He came over to fix the sink and we just clicked. I didn't mean for it to happen, Matt. But you were always working late, and I was lonely." Her words cut deeper than I expected. "So, because you were lonely, you decided to screw the first guy who walked through the door? That's not fair," she snapped. "You don't know what it's like to feel invisible in your own marriage." "Invisible," I said, my voice rising. "I've spent the last 7 years breaking my back to give you everything you've ever wanted. And this is how you repay me." She stood up, pointing a finger at me. "You're acting like this is all on me, but let's not forget you're no saint. You've been checked out of this marriage for years, Matt. And maybe, just maybe, I needed someone who actually noticed me." I stared at her, completely stunned. Every word out of her mouth felt like another twist of the knife. But then something clicked in my head. something I'd been too angry to notice before. "What about the money?" I asked suddenly. She blinked, caught off guard. "What money?" "Don't play dumb, Jess. The money that's been disappearing from our account over the last few months. You said it was for groceries and yoga retreats, but now I'm starting to wonder. Were you using it to fund your little distraction?" Her face turned red, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. "That's none of your business." "Oh, it's absolutely my business," I shot back. "You've been lying to me, cheating on me, and now I find out you've been using my hard-earned money to cover for it? Do you even feel bad about anything you've done?" She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed her phone and stormed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I sat there in the silence, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to chase after her and keep demanding answers, but I knew it wouldn't get me anywhere. Jess was a master manipulator, and if I let her, she'd twist this around until I was the one apologizing. But not this time. This time I was done playing her games. I sat in the living room for hours after Jess stormed upstairs, replaying every fight, every lie, and every red flag I'd ignored over the years. The hurt was still raw, but the anger was beginning to take its place. I wasn't going to let Jess walk all over me anymore. If she thought she could get away with this, she was dead wrong. The first thing I did was check our bank accounts. Over the last few months, I'd noticed little discrepancies here and there. Withdrawals I didn't remember approving, vague purchases Jess couldn't explain. I'd brushed it off at the time, trusting her when she said she needed extra cash for yoga retreats or spa days. Now, I realized she'd been using my money to fund her affair with Chad. The second thing I did was call a lawyer. I didn't tell Jess, of course. She didn't need to know that I was already laying the groundwork to protect myself if this turned into a divorce. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Ellen, assured me that Jess's infidelity would work in my favor if it came to that. "Start documenting everything," Ellen said. "Keep screenshots, receipts, and any evidence you can find." And that's exactly what I did. While Jess sulked in the bedroom, I went through her social media, our joint email account, and even her texts on the family tablet she always forgot to log out of. What I found made my blood boil. There were dozens of messages between Jess and Chad, dating back months. Some were flirty, others downright explicit. But the worst ones were the ones where she mocked me. "Matt's such a clueless workaholic," she'd written in one text. "He doesn't even notice when I leave the house for hours." In another, she joked about using my credit card to buy Chad a new set of tools. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I held back. If I was going to get my revenge, I needed to play it smart. So I spent the next few days acting like nothing had changed. I went to work, came home, and pretended to believe every lame excuse Jess threw my way. Meanwhile, I kept collecting evidence and working with Ellen to finalize my plan. The turning point came a week later when Jess left the house to meet a friend for coffee. I didn't believe her for a second, so I decided to follow her. Sure enough, she didn't go to a coffee shop. She drove straight to Chad's house. I parked a few blocks away and watched as she let herself in without even knocking. It was clear this wasn't the first time she'd been there. That was it, the last straw. I called Brian and told him everything, including my plan for what came next. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "You're playing with fire, man." "I'm sure," I said. "It's time Jess learns that actions have consequences." The next day, I put my plan into motion. Jess had no idea what was coming, and I was counting on her arrogance to keep her off guard. While she was out running errands, I made some calls, sent some emails, and set the stage for her world to come crashing down. First, I canceled her access to all our joint accounts. The credit cards she loved to use? Frozen. The emergency savings account she dipped into without telling me? Transferred to a new account in my name. I even changed the passwords on our streaming services, just for the satisfaction of knowing she couldn't binge-watch her trashy reality shows while I dismantled her life. Next, I called Chad's wife. Yeah, it turns out he was married, too. I'd found her number in one of Jess's text threads where she joked about the risks of their affair. Her name was Lisa, and she was livid when I told her everything. We ended up swapping stories for nearly an hour, piecing together just how long this had been going on. Lisa promised to handle Chad in her own way, and let's just say I didn't envy him. But the piece de resistance came later that evening. I had arranged for Jess to walk into her own little nightmare. When she came home that night, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a folder of evidence in front of me. "Hey, babe," she said, setting her purse down like nothing was wrong. "What's for dinner?" I smiled coldly. "Oh, don't worry about that. We need to talk." Her face fell instantly, and she shifted uncomfortably. "Matt, if this is about last week, I thought we agreed to move past it." "Oh, I've moved past it. All right," I said, sliding the folder toward her. "But you might want to take a look at this." She hesitated before opening it, and when she did, her eyes went wide. Inside were printouts of her text messages with Chad, receipts for the money she'd siphoned from our accounts, and even photos I'd taken of her sneaking into Chad's house. What is this?" she stammered, her voice shaky. "This," I said calmly, "is everything I'm taking to the lawyer I hired last week. You know, the one who's helping me file for divorce." Jess's face turned red, then pale, as the reality of the situation sank in. "You can't be serious, Matt. You're really going to throw away our marriage over this?" I laughed bitterly. "Throw it away? Jess, you torched it the second you started screwing the plumber. This is me cleaning up the ashes." She tried to argue, to twist things around like she always did, but I wasn't having it. I told her I'd already spoken to Ellen, our lawyer, and that I had everything I needed to prove infidelity. I also let her know that Chad's wife was in the loop and planned to confront him. For once, Jess was speechless. Then I hit her with the final blow. "Oh, and one more thing," I said, standing up. "I've already talked to the landlord. Since your name's not on the lease, you'll need to find somewhere else to live. I'll give you a week to pack." "You can't do this," she shrieked, tears streaming down her face. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem," I said, grabbing my keys. "Maybe Chad can fix that too." The days following our final confrontation were a whirlwind of chaos and bitter satisfaction. Jess tried every trick in the book to manipulate her way out of the situation. First, she cried, pleading with me to give her another chance. "We can fix this, Matt," she sobbed. "I made a mistake, but we're stronger than this." When that didn't work, she switched tactics. Her apologies turned into threats. "You think you're going to come out of this looking like the good guy? Don't forget, I know things about you too. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of husband you really are." I didn't even bother responding to that one. Jess was flailing, desperate to regain control of a situation she had no power over anymore. I ignored her threats, knowing I had all the proof I needed to show who the real victim was in this mess. The lawyer assured me that Jess's infidelity would carry significant weight in the divorce proceedings, especially since I documented everything so meticulously. Meanwhile, word got around fast. Lisa, Chad's wife, didn't waste any time airing out her dirty laundry. She plastered everything on social media, screenshots of Chad's texts, photos of Jess and Chad together, and a scathing post detailing their affair. It went viral in our small town, and soon everyone knew about Plumber Chad and his escapades. Jess couldn't show her face without people whispering behind her back. She tried to play the victim, claiming I'd blown things out of proportion and that her mistakes were private matters. But no one was buying it, especially after Lisa's receipts came to light. Chad, on the other hand, lost his plumbing business almost overnight. His clients dropped him like a hot potato, and Lisa filed for divorce within days of our conversation. I heard he moved out of town shortly after, though not before Lisa threw all his tools onto their front lawn in full view of the neighbors. At home, Jess packed her things, dragging out the process as long as possible. She left little passive-aggressive notes around the house, as if trying to guilt me into changing my mind. "I hope you find happiness without me," one read, written in her perfect handwriting. Another said, "You'll regret this when you're all alone." I ignored them all. When the week was up, I stood in the doorway and watched her load the last of her bags into her car. She turned to look at me, her face a mix of anger, sadness, and regret. "You're making a mistake, Matt," she said softly. "You'll see." No, Jess, I replied, my voice steady. The only mistake I made was trusting you. She didn't have a response. She got into her car and drove away without another word. The first few days after Jess left were eerily quiet. The house, once filled with her voice and presence, even if it had turned toxic, now felt like an empty shell. Buddy, our dog, seemed to sense the shift too. He followed me around the house, wagging his tail a little slower than usual, like he was trying to cheer me up. At first, the silence was unbearable. I replayed every fight, every red flag, every moment I'd ignored my gut. I felt anger, sadness, and even flashes of guilt. Could I have done something differently? Should I have tried harder to make her happy? Those thoughts came and went, but every time I remembered Jess's smug face and her excuses, I reminded myself that this wasn't my failure. It was hers. The divorce process was surprisingly smooth, thanks to Ellen and the mountain of evidence I'd gathered. Jess didn't put up much of a fight once she realized she was backed into a corner. She got the message loud and clear. Her lies, her betrayal, and her manipulation weren't going to work on me anymore. The divorce was finalized in just a few months, and I walked away with the house, the car, and most of my dignity intact. Lisa and I kept in touch sporadically. We weren't exactly friends, but there was a weird camaraderie between us, born out of shared betrayal. She ended up thriving after her split with Chad, got a promotion at work, moved to a new city, and even started dating again. As for Chad, well, last I heard, he was living in some rundown apartment 2 towns over, barely scraping by. Karma, I guess. As for me, I took my time healing. I threw myself into work, spent more time with friends, and started taking Buddy on long hikes. Something Jess had always complained about. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The weight of trying to please someone who couldn't be pleased was gone, and it felt damn good. About a year after the divorce, I met someone new. Her name's Emily, and she's nothing like Jess. She's kind, grounded, and most importantly, honest. We've been taking things slow, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful about the future. I've learned to trust my instincts, to value myself, and to never ignore red flags just because I love someone. If I could give advice to anyone reading this, it would be this: don't settle for less than you deserve. Love shouldn't make you feel like you're constantly failing or like you're walking on eggshells. And if someone betrays your trust, don't let them convince you it's your fault. It's not. Life is too short to waste on people who don't value you. And trust me, there's nothing more liberating than taking back control of your own happiness. Thank you for staying with me. This crazy journey is finally over and I'm ready for what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more interesting stories. And leave a comment with what you would do in this situation. See you in the next videos.